Perfect. Welcome everyone to our first quarter TSC call for the Open Mainframe Project COBOL programming course. And just in time. I'd like to get started with a quick introduction of our TSC team here. My name is Sudarshana Srinivasan. I am an IBM-Z advocacy program manager and super thrilled to be part of this COBOL programming course since the very beginning, right? We got to work on actually pulling the course together. Paul and I are sort of partners in crime in that project, and very excited when we were able to launch it on Open Mainframe Project back in April 2020. So I've been part of this project since the beginning and have loved the ride here and look forward to really what we can achieve and bring more to our learners here in 2022, which is why we're here to learn from the community, share some of your ideas, thoughts, and more. But with that, I'll pass it over to Mike.
Thank you. I'm Michael Bauer. I'm a product owner at Broadcom working on our DevOps and mainframe modernization solutions. In the open source community, I'm a TSC member on the COBOL programming course, as well as on the Zoe project. And in particular on the Zoe project, I'm heavily involved in the Zoe command line interface and Zoe Explorer VS Code extension technology. So if you ever have any questions related to any of those initiatives, feel free to reach out to me directly on our Slack channel. With that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Paul, are you on mute, perhaps?
Oh, yes, I was on mute.
Yes,
yeah, so I helped get the program started, but I'm amazed at how much content is out there and how many people have contributed. Every time I go look, I'm just in awe. So I haven't been contributing that much, but I just pretty much got it started. And so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Paul, for getting us started and being sort of the SME and really helping us with how and what COBOL can do. So thank you for that. Hartanto.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hartanto, and yes, I'm currently a student. I was a summer mentee back in 2021, and now I stick around and continue to help for the project. And with that, over to you, Joe.
And Hartanto is who we call the new face of COBOL. He has been an amazing, amazing member of the team since pretty much the very beginning. He's been responding to questions on the Slack channel. He was a summer mentee last year, something he did not, did you mention that, Hartanto? He was a summer mentee. He developed the advanced course. So he's been an asset, an amazing, amazing wealth to this team. So thank you, Hartanto, for being part of this team. Joe, last but not the least.
Oh yeah, hi everyone. My name's Joe Winchester. I work on the Zoe project. And I also, before that, in a previous life, I used to work on Kix tooling. And something I'm very much looking forward to doing is helping fuse the world of Kix COBOL and open source, open mainframe project initiatives like the Zoe Explorer and other things going on. So, hi.
Thank you, Joe, for jumping in and now being part of our team as well. Love to have your expertise here. We do have a couple of amazing guest speakers. We'll introduce them here in just a minute. Rune and Simon from Bankdata, we're looking forward to hearing from them. Before we get to that, we just wanted to quickly go through our, the COBOL programming course. What is really the mission? Why should someone consider doing COBOL, right? The mission of the course really is very simple. It is to attract that next generation of COBOLers or learners to add COBOL to their tech toolkit, as we call it. What this COBOL programming course really provides you is that improved learning experience with the modern tooling interface. You heard Mike talk about Zoe. The course is very much built on that platform. It leverages Zoe with VS Code and creating that engaged and enthusiastic community of learners. And I'll say that is so true. Our Slack channel has close to 4,000 learners there now, and everyone really helping each other out. And for those tough questions, we have Mike and Hartanto on call. They are super amazing and help the community there. So why should you consider learning COBOL? With over 2 billion lines of code in execution to date, this powerful language runs the world's economy. That's a given. And the benefit, as we present the course to you, is the modern tooling to enhance your learning experience. And it is definitely a key differentiator on your professional profile, right? It's an in-demand skill set. So think about it. It's not an and, it's not an or. Should it be Java or COBOL or Node or Python? But I say go for the and make COBOL, as an and in your toolkit, right? Mike, so why don't you walk us through a little bit about the repo itself and some of the getting started course?
Absolutely. So if you're interested in getting started with learning COBOL, you just visit our repository here at github.com/open mainframe project/COBOL-programming-course. And how you would get started, how I recommend you get started, is at this top level. If you would happen to scroll down this page, you would see a README file. And in that README file, it contains instructions on how to get started. We periodically release new content. So even if you've taken the course in its early days, be sure to check back for the latest and greatest content. We're now on release 2.3.0. Underneath this release, you would see a few different published courses. Of course, we have our Getting Started course, which I'll talk more about in a moment, but we also have a French translation of that course, as well as an advanced topics course, which Hartanto would talk on in a little bit. But one great asset in this is that because we use Zoe client technologies, all of the client software to take the course is free and publicly available and open source, so you can easily grab that to learn COBOL on the mainframe. And in addition, you can take this course if you have access to a mainframe. All the content is part of this repository. You can set it up on your own mainframe, but IBM has also provided an environment that's already set up where you can just apply for credentials to log into that system, and you can complete the course there. So it gives you access to a real environment so you can have hands-on experience while you're learning COBOL. And I think one of the greatest aspects of this course is that after nearly all of the chapters, there's a hands-on lab. So you get a hands-on exercise to reinforce what you have learned throughout the topics of a particular chapter. So if we move on to the next slide. The Getting Started course is broken down into two sections. Part one is mostly on getting started, setting up the client technologies. So we use Visual Studio Code as our development environment for interacting with the mainframe and for completing most of the exercises in the course. That VS Code environment consists of the Zoe Explorer, which provides access to mainframe datasets, USS files, as well as jobs. And on top of Zoe Explorer, there's a few commercial technologies that, while not strictly open source, are free and publicly available. And those provide things like syntax highlighting, integration with COBOL copybooks and things like that. And there's two key Visual Studio Code extensions or extension packs on the market today. One is the IBM Z Open Editor. The other is the Code for Z extension pack. All an extension pack is a collection of various Visual Studio Code extensions. So in that extension pack, for example, there's one for interacting with COBOL, one for high-level assembler, etc. Primarily, we use the COBOL language support extension of the Code for Z extension pack in this course. And then, of course, in addition to the Zoe Explorer VS Code extension, the Zoe command line interface is also introduced in this course. The key power behind a command line interface is that it's both a user interface and a programmatic interface. So this lends itself to scripting and integrating mainframe into enterprise DevOps pipelines. Part two of the course, once you have the tooling set up, is just about learning COBOL, which is really the key aspect of this course and where we get a lot of interest. So the basics of COBOL, just learning about what it is, the importance of COBOL, the basic syntax, and then we move into some more topics like data division, table handling, file handling, program structure, arithmetic expressions, data types. Really interesting section on intrinsic functions, really shows the power of COBOL, especially how it's grown over time, as well as add-in handling. We also have a number of advanced topics, and I will turn it over to Hartanto to briefly walk us through those.
Okay, so for our first topic, we build upon the materials that was taught in the previous chapter. However, we attempt to explore more on the newer features that Enterprise COBOL have, such as dynamic length item and UTF-8 data type. And as a couple of highlights, we try to dive deeper into common stuff such as compilation and the compile options and how someone can basically tune their program, whether it's using an efficient data type or to compare options. Furthermore, we also have multiple COBOL challenges which will provide students with the opportunity to learn and develop their own program based on a given problem. And with that, over to you, Sudatana.
You may be on mute.
Yes, I was. So with that, we'd like to invite our guest speakers here today, Rune Christensen and Simon Mikkelsen, both from Bankdata, to really share their experience with this COBOL programming course. So Joe, Paul, we'd love to hear from you and, to talk with our speakers here. But before we do that, Rune, Simon, please go ahead, introduce yourselves to our community here, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about the course, how you've been leveraging it at Bankdata, and any insights you have for us about COBOL.
Thank you. So just in short, Bankdata is a company that supplies back office and front office applications for 9 different banks in Denmark. We are working both in COBOL and in Java. And at the moment, we have 130,000 COBOL programs and 95 million lines of COBOL code. That's the amount of code that the code base that we are working with. The way that we are using the COBOL course is very decentralized. I am in a department and a team that has the responsibility for courses in general in Bankdata, but we are suppliers of content, not the ones that are doing the courses. So every team has seniors or neighboring teams that has seniors that are in charge of onboarding new people and in charge of the courses. So we have quite a large catalog of different things. And Simon is one of our newer employees, and he went through the COBOL course, or I don't know how far he is. So I think I'll push it over to him to talk about his experience with the course.
Thank you. As Rune said, my name is Simon. I was hired into Bankdata for 2 months ago. I'm a senior software developer. I have about 20 years of experience in various programming languages and environments, everything from Perl on our web server to Java in OpenShift. And when I came to Bankdata, I assumed I would have to learn some mainframe at some time, and that came fast. I've not had a lot of time to spend on this course. I actually should have started spending a serious amount, but then suddenly our deadline was came up, so we have to work hard on that, and that's actually Angular. And the plan of our team is that we are going to have responsibility for the whole stack, all the way from COBOL through Java and up to the Angular front end. The time I have spent on the course, I think when I came into it, it described the language pretty well. In the beginning, I had some difficulty putting all the information onto something, so I actually went on to medium.com and found a 6-minute read. Here's a very simple real COBOL program. Here is very, very basics. And then I had something to put it up to. And after that, I think it sounds very reasonable. There's a good explanation of getting the tool started. It's very important that there is a link to an environment where I can try stuff out, because yeah, we have a lot of mainframes in Bankdata, but I don't have the knowledge to execute anything on them without risking breaking stuff. And in a bank, we don't like breaking anything. I have learned a lot of programming languages. So in general, I can say that what I usually need when I learn a programming language, that it can be from a book or a course or anything that is after the language has been presented for me. Then I need something best practices. It's often called a cookbook. How do I do certain things that you have to do a lot? And I could see it in the advanced topics that a lot of things were mentioned. Something I can also see when I inspect the code of more junior programmers is that they do something that's really, really bad, and they don't know it. So often I need the worst practice cookbook also. And you can find the best practice for many languages. Bad practice are hard to get, but what I often need, and I haven't got far enough into this course to say if that needs it. It is how do I do things and how don't I do things. The example I usually put up is a program in a book. Somebody want to tell how do you execute a piece of SQL. Select something based on a username, and then they just write a username in the SQL. The problem with that is when the junior developer opens the book, he sees, oh, this is how I make SQL, and then he just appends some strings, and the experienced programmer can see now we have a SQL injection and your database is on the internet. And that actually happens a lot to still today, even though it's an old problem. So more about that, how do you do things after you can say after you have been given all the Lego pieces, how do you put them together?
Yeah, so Simon, that's really interesting. So I think what you're saying, that's one of the things we struggle with is we can introduce people to COBOL and get them to write batch COBOL and use some of our tooling. But I think what you're saying is what you want is the kind of best practices, how to really make it scale, perhaps build. You talked about Angular and things like that. So I have a question for you, Simon, if that's okay. So when you write your Angular code, are you writing it in Visual Studio Code?
We use IntelliJ to write our Angular code. One of my teammates use Visual Studio Code. But I have seen that Visual Studio Code becomes more and more popular, also in the Java class, where IntelliJ has been the absolute ruler for many years. So it's definitely a fresh start, because IntelliJ is an old piece of software to juggle with sometimes, even though it's brilliant.
So do you think for the course, Mike showed some pictures of that earlier, do you think we're on the right direction to focus on Visual Studio Code? Because you can learn COBOL in ISPF, right? And people have learned that for the last 30 or 40 years. Do you think, and right now the OMP, the COBOL course is very Visual Studio centered. Do you think that's the right thing for us to do? And do you think there's...
Yes, I think Visual Studio Code is the right way to do, both because I actually like it for what I have used it for. I also see that a lot of young people use that as their only editor. Also because, yes, we have IntelliJ and we have a free version that cannot do a lot, and you have to pay a lot to get that editor. I still prefer that for Java when my employer pays for the license. But the Visual Studio Code is definitely the way to go, because anyone can just download it and get started.
Okay, so I've got a question, Simon, for both you and for Rune as well. I always ask Rune this question whenever we get together. So if you were our bosses, and you are our bosses, by the way, because what we build, you use, and what do you want us to work on? And I'll give you a few options just to get your ideas. We could make, we could add more support for kicks. We could add more support for things like debugging. We could add support for testing. We could add more real world scenarios like you just talked about, which is end to end from perhaps a web front end, going through COBOL, calling to DB2. All of these things are possible. We can't do them all. What's the most useful for Simon and Rune? What do you think would best set us up for the next year and beyond?
Yeah.
I have a list, so.
You knew I was going to ask you.
Oh.
Go ahead. Yeah, it's all yours. I'll go on mute now.
So in Bankdata, we are doing a lot of effort to hide kicks, actually. We want our developers to focus on providing value to our end users. And having a COBOL programmer spend time on making and understanding kicks calls when it's just a layer of abstraction is something we don't want them to spend their time on. We don't mind them investigating kicks, but our entire web service set up, and we're just moving into REST services set up. It's totally hidden from the developer. So I don't want you to focus on that. I want you to focus on testing.
Okay, testing.
You knew that was what I was going to pick.
Well, I know you have the COBOL check. Talk to us about COBOL check, because that's something really interesting, because we could integrate that in the course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm in the TSC. Oh, so COBOL check is another open mainframe project, exactly. which is unit testing for COBOL, where you are unit testing sections or paragraphs. So you can unit test 3 lines of code instead of having to test an entire program. And we released version 0.1 last year and are working towards releasing something around 0.1.5, where we are, at the moment, we have a student worker working hard on implementing a lot of features to make it usable in the state that it is. So, yeah, testing is a big thing at our shop right now.
So Simon, what was
my top? Yes, if I should give my top 2, I would definitely say like Rune, automatic testing on number 1, and then debugging on number 2, because I've not done any production COBOL code yet, but I have done a lot of Java code, and sometimes you end up writing something and you just don't know what to do, and then you end up writing stuff into the terminal if you don't have proper debug tools, and proper debug tools are just invaluable in order to know how the program works.
So for debugging, so there's a bit of other. So if Rune, if you're saying you want to bury COBOL, presumably people do have to understand web services. But
kicks. And I want to bury kicks. I don't want to bury COBOL.
You want to bury kicks, but you don't want to bury COBOL. So you want to write your COBOL.
I want to hide the kicks interface. I don't want our developers to be able to write a exit kick start trans.
Okay, this is where I was going. Okay, so what would they do instead? They would just call another program with a COBOL call statement, and then that would completely, got it. That would encapsulate all of that logic. Yeah. Okay, understood.
The one question I've got is, you were mentioning about making kicks a little bit behind the scenes. How about your data sources? What kind of data sources are important to you?
We're using MQ and we're using DB2. So everybody makes SQL, and we are not hiding SQL in any way. We are not using stored procedures or user-defined functions in SQL. So it's direct SQL access. MQ is actually also encapsulated at our shop. Again, because we don't need developers to sit down and read the entire MQ manual to be able to make a put one. Just give us the queue name and we'll figure out where it's going. So, yeah.
So while we've got COBOL to DB2 APIs and examples, we don't have anything with MQ yet. And I was just thinking, if we did something with MQ, what do we have MQ talk to? So I don't know if you've got any thoughts about that. Just an MQ client that talks to an MQ server that then talks to batch COBOL, or is there any particular things you would like to see there? And if not, that's a perfectly good answer.
There are other things I would focus on.
Okay.
We're also using a lot of skeleton programs. So if a developer needs to make a usage of an MQ, they can actually just pull down code from the shelf and fill it in with their own logic. So they don't have to think lots about how to use MQ.
Okay.
Well, we're an old. We've celebrated 50 years. This company 5 years ago. So we have a lot of features and setup to take care of this.
Okay. And for Simon, I realize Simon mentioned he's brand new with COBOL and the mainframe. So if I understood you correct, Simon, you've only been at this for 2 months, and that is not very much time at all. And so based on what you know so far, which is not a lot because of only 2 months, would you be recommending this to other associates that need to know COBOL based on what you've seen so far?
Yes, I would definitely do that. I have not read the entire getting started section yet and not written a single line, but I think that after I found my little example that is sort of a shelf to put everything on, then I feel that the language seemed to be explained very well, and the whole set about the tooling is set up, and it explained how you can get started writing your first line of COBOL. And that's important to get started writing COBOL, because you don't learn a programming language by reading a book. You do it by writing code and by making mistakes and fixing them. And it seems that the course has all those elements. So I would definitely go on that.
And another side question related to the OMP site, there's a lot of videos there from professionals. Did you ever have a chance to look at some of those videos where professionals are talking about COBOL?
Yes, I actually got to look at a 10-minute of a video on YouTube that was linked from the course. It also introduced the language very well, and it was a lot of one of the standard introductions to COBOL that you might not know the world is running a COBOL, but it actually is. And after all of my years in Java, I knew that a lot of the world is running on COBOL. So I'm actually a little excited to getting to do it, but now we have some Angular stuff to finish.
Excellent, thank you.
Then I will also say thank you. I have to leave it's the kids' bedtime, so I wish you a good night.
Thank you so much, Simon. That's the biggest compliment, that you will recommend this, to your fellow colleagues and learners as well. So thank you for joining us today. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, just some.
Yeah, I think we have a few folks on the call. Feel free to pop in a question in the Q&A to our attendees here today, or drop it in the chat. Either way, I'm happy to look and help answer those questions. But yeah, so back to, I think, Rune, in our plan for this year, we were considering, bringing in, right now it's batch COBOL. How could we weave in kicks into COBOL so that we can showcase the transaction processing aspect of COBOL, which really what this is all about. So any thoughts on that? I know you showed us a big list. do take a screenshot and share. We'll look at that for sure. But any thoughts on that? And I hear you on wanting to hide kicks, and so that the focus is on COBOL from a COBOL developer point of view. So happy to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think that understanding transaction-based programming is very important, because, well, and understanding batch-based programming is also important. In understanding when you have to put your commits and how you can restart a batch application is important lessons. At the moment, this course doesn't cover that, and I don't know if it should. But again, understanding transaction-based programming is also important. One of the most common mistakes our new programmers make is concurrency. That they want to update a record, and they just update it without investigating, am I actually the last one that read this record? So things like that understanding that another person could actually have updated the record you're working with while you're working. That issue that you're seeing data on the screen doesn't mean that that data is locked for you. You have to make sure that that's the same data that you're working on. So transaction-based programming is an important part. Kicks is a very large part of that, but it is also, as I see it, Kicks doesn't supply business logic. Kicks supplies the ability for us to run, and it supplies some functionality like web services and REST input. And although it's great that we have that, but with 250 COBOL developers, I don't need 250 COBOL developers to figure out how they can make their own REST services. I have to do that. My team has to do that and supply a working setup that they can just come with a YAML and say, this is the service we want, and we can pull that through an engine and provide COBOL copybooks for them and an endpoint.
So if I could, I would like to echo back some of the things I think I heard there.
Sure.
It turns out that some of the things you were just talking about, there's a new open mainframe project for ZOS education. And many of the things you just told me about the concurrency mistakes, not understanding that dirty reads can happen and maybe dirty reads are not what you want. And then also, it sounded to me like, and you can correct me, you want them to understand the significance of transaction processing, that it truly is. Data doesn't begin there or end there, neither does the request begin there or end there. It facilitates the sharing of massive data and programs and apps. And the reason I bring that up is because this new open mainframe project about ZOS education, that may fall in there, is what I'm thinking, because that's excellent feedback that you just mentioned to me. And about the restart. So I'm hearing things that may go into a different open mainframe project that's being that's starting up right now. So thank you for that input. And cool. if I've got that correct. So if I didn't get it quite correct, please elaborate.
You're spot on. Because if that that education could become open source and online, well, that's another thing I don't have to teach them.
Okay, yeah, that's
fine. Go over there.
Exactly.
More about,
Also, go ahead, Mike.
Also, just to follow up on your last point, which I thought was interesting about passing a YAML file to a generator to create some sort of, template COBOL program. So like around that topic, do you find that within your organization, you're developing a lot of new COBOL programs or mostly making updates to existing COBOL programs?
We're making a lot of new COBOL, but most of it is on top of skeletons. So we're not building a batch program from scratch. They're given 150 lines of code that will take care of checkpoint restarts, and it will take care of commits. That we're just pointing, you need to put your COBOL here.
So to determine as the developer which one of those 150 skeletons, is that where they're passing in the information on a YAML file?
No, I'm not. No, I'm giving them 130 lines of code. We have 40 skeletons or so.
Okay. Okay. Well, I was just wondering, because a lot of times when I hear about organizations providing developers with skeletons, I think of code snippets, which is a relatively new feature of some of these text editors like Visual Studio Code. So I know a lot of organizations, they may have implemented JCL snippets where folks can quickly access, JCL. Instead of having to look through somebody's PDS to find a particular piece of JCL, it's just built right into the technology.
We have a lot of that too.
Okay, cool.
So actually, we built a code completion tool for the mainframe, where nice. The developer can just, using spacebar or control spacebar, get suggestions for completing the line that they're working on. Yeah. So suggestions specifically for the COBOL course, XML and JSON parsing and generating. We're doing a lot of that, and we'll be doing even more of that in the coming years. So all, and that's where people are using code stolen from somewhere else. Oh, I need to parse some XML. How did everybody else do it? So yeah, we are copying each other's errors. There are some areas. I looked through the course, and there are some areas where I think it could be improved. For example, the description of how to call a subprogram. So I don't think that's covered enough, especially on the other side, on the called program side. There's no description of how a linkage section is working and how procedure division is working, and how the linkage section, the procedure division is working together to transfer data from one program to another. Yeah, you were mentioning copybooks, and I love that because we are using a lot of copybooks. I think that you should add that copybooks is an excellent tool for defining an interface between two programs, so you don't have to have that code duplicated in two programs. And just with a simple change of a copybook, you can update both programs.
Rune, do you use channels and containers in Kix, or just the COM area?
Oh, yeah, lots of them.
You do? Okay. Right.
We even have a program that encapsulates that as well.
So when you were talking about the linkage section, so I didn't write that part, but I've helped a lot of college professors with that. And do you think it would, for visualization of understanding that linkage section where the main line's calling a subroutine, in some cases, a subroutine calling another subroutine to kind of show how the data can be passed across three programs may be a better visualization? Because I was trying to think, how would I explain that to a college student and have some kind of visualization of getting the data? And I thought, well, maybe 3 levels of programs might be the way, where the subroutine calls another subroutine, which isn't that far off, because sometimes you got your mainline program calling something that's then going to deal with the data source, or maybe even deal with the transaction management system. And so 3 levels might be a way to demonstrate that. I just didn't know your thoughts on that.
Sure. We have lots, much deeper COBOL called hierarchies in Bankdata. So yeah, sure, that's a great way to do it.
Okay.
And in most cases, you would always have 3 levels.
Yeah.
Because you're also, everybody's talking about services and web service and all that, but you're also making services in COBOL. So we have a service called currency rates. We don't have people access the currency rate directly on the DB2. We have a program that shields and hides all that knowledge and data so that everybody can call that program.
Yeah. Yes, that confirms
that's
that.
A service.
Yeah. That confirms that. So it's not just the linkage sections itself and making sure you understand how to get data between the programs, but they need to understand why you would be using multiple layers of calls.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rune, I've got a quick thing about your programs. Do you use TSQs and TDQs and KEX and things for just, would that be useful? Because we don't support that in our KEX.
We use it, but it's not commonly used.
Okay. So you mentioned MQ. Would there be, so that's something that we could do. We haven't done anything yet. Even Zoe hasn't done that. But in my mind's eye, because there is the, I forgot what it's called. Is it the MQSC transaction? And you convoke it. We can call it through a web service. We even have a command line interface that can actually browse queues and put data on queues and stuff. So we could prettify that with a VS Code extension where you could see a list of queue managers and queues and look at data and post data. Would that be useful in a kind of debugging Scratch environment? So it's not the traditional stop-start debugging, but you're still debugging because you're posting and reading data and manipulating the environment.
So right now we're, as you know, Joe, we're developing we're moving towards VS Code.
Exactly, yeah.
Developing a VS Code platform for our developers. So at the moment, the toolbox that we're looking at is VS Code and Aqua from IBM as the debugger and MQ manager.
Yeah, the Aqua has the MQ Explorer, I think it does, which is very functional. But I'm thinking maybe we could just take just the developer pieces, which is probably, we don't have to create the complex things, create queue managers and do initiator queues and stuff, but there could be an element where we surface that into VS Code.
Yeah, and I think I would like to have that in VS Code because as good as Aqua is, it also has way too many options and features and
I know it's like the Swiss Army knife of
it is. And it can be a nightmare to use. Don't tell that to those guys. It's a great tool, but having a simplified version would be great.
That's what's great about COBOL or focusing on developers, focusing on a use case and a scenario. The Aqua tool was like everything to everybody. The second it was built, it's like the system programmers wanted it to do. So it's too powerful. It's too powerful. Yeah. So if we can just focus on, keep our feet both on the ground about we're for COBOL, we're for developers, and then get feedback from you, we can do that.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at Mike Bauer here. I'm thinking that's our next Zoe Explorer extension, a Zoe Explorer for MQ or something where we can.
Yeah, that sounds good. Like you said, we have a good base for it with the CLI code. So.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we could little hackathon project. We got our work cut out for us. Okay.
A lot of fun projects for summer mentorship, indeed.
Yeah. Sudhashna, can I ask Rune one quick question? It's burning on my mind. So Rune, one of the questions that we have, and it's mostly Paul and Hadanto, is I think the COBOL programming course, I don't know how many people did it exactly, but when I look at the Slack channel, I think there's like 8,000 people registered from it. Very, very popular. If we wind ahead to Kicks, what we're toying with is how do we scale up? Do we let every user have their own Kicks region? Do we let people share a Kicks region? in which case they're going to collide and we're going to have to, these are the sort of issues that we're just dealing with now. In a way, the tooling is the easy part. It's the scalability for deployment. Yeah.
I love it because I saw Rune's expression and I've got a feeling I know what he's going to say based on just picture you had to do this at your shop for your developers.
Well, I know what I would do. I would wait. Because I know that the Kix guys are working on containerized Kix. And that's what you want to use. So you can spin up a container with a Kix for each individual user, and you'll have no problems at all. But that's generation next on the Kix backlog.
We don't have to, fiddle about, and I was going to, do tricks in the front. All of that can be abstracted lower down, right? In the OS, in VMs, in containers and things. Yeah. And I think that, I don't know, Paul, that might be the play to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the thought, we've got a single ZOS at this point, and to accommodate thousands of people and not collide, not have thousands, I don't have room for thousands of Kixes, but then not to collide definitions. So it's very tricky.
Oh yeah, that's one part of it. And if you want them all to be on the same Kix, you have to consider that they're working with programs that are called the same.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's where. Yeah, that's the collision of definitions, right?
You have load libraries, and if you're doing thousands of Kix, you'll have load libraries for all Kix.
Right.
Yeah, it'll be a nightmare, or interesting, depending on what you look. How do you think about it?
Well, thank you for that comment, because it confirms what I've been saying. You're a real practitioner and know. And I love the fact that he's focusing on simplicity, because being in production shops, there's enough problems. Complexity just adds problems. Over engineering. Simplicity is really key in production shops. So I appreciate that comment.
Absolutely. That expression and the one word. So Joe, I guess we're waiting.
For the Kix.
Yes, exactly.
Or we perhaps have like 20 regions or something, or 15, and you can give them out to the first 20 people who do the course, and then they have to do it in 2 weeks or something like that. So you can just retire a small set. But that at least lets you, I don't know. So
you could probably also do something like do some automated reshuffling of the Kixes and simply look at, is there any work being done on this Kix, and if not, then repurpose it for the next user. I have no idea how many would be using at the same time. So.
Yeah, and so what I'm hearing in terms of priorities is, you talked about when it comes to COBOL in this particular platform, the linkage section seems to be a priority, for your young people to understand that. And then the other things that you brought up that are kind of important to me are like the concurrency mistakes and some of those other things about what is a transaction processor and why is it important. So I see those in a different OMP project for ZOS education, so I won't forget those. But I don't want to lose sight of your priorities that you brought up. And were there other things on your list that you didn't tell us?
There's one more thing, and I think that it's because I think part one is too big.
Okay. Now I see Michael smiling there. So when we started part one, it was kind of small. I will let you know. And I was shocked when I went there. And they've got to understand, when you really want to jump into COBOL, you got to get the part two. Because we were, and Sudarshan knows this, we tried to lead with so-called modernization tooling. And I'm kind of a caveman. I would have put a TN3270 out there. But, and so you're right, I kind of agree with you. But how do we pare it back? I'm not sure. But yeah, I can appreciate the comment.
So when I'm looking at part one, it takes up 50 pages in a 150-page document. what I would do is I would take those 50 pages and make another document out of those. Because at our company, I'm actually able to deliver a VS Code setup with these extensions already installed, and the user during the setup has to input his user and credentials, and he's up and running. He's running in 5 minutes instead of having to read through a 50-page document. So I can automate that for my developers. And then I would like to reiterate what Simon said, focus on getting a program running. Learning about data division and file section and all those things are also important, but they're not as important as writing hello world.
Very good point. So perhaps like a separate setup chapter, so that the learning COBOL is really what that first chapter then becomes, the getting started. Good point. Thank you, Rune. Thank you. I think there was one question. Thanks, Joe and Hartanto, for responding with the link. One of our attendees wanted to know where to get started, and we'll post that link once again. Hartanto, if you have the link handy, post it once again in our chat. Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts for Rune? I was just going to close the call with some resources for our learners to have handy and really just get started and dive into this COBOL journey. But before that, any other questions or thoughts?
Not any questions, but a thought. Thank you very much, because it was really down to earth what you gave us, and very practical from a person that really is responsible for a production environment. Many times, those of us that aren't taking care of production data lose sight of what you're dealing with. So I could appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Yeah,
plus one, Paul. Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
I completely agree. And then I had one comment and one question. So the comment is just that, I see your point about part one being long. I think there's some ways we can improve that. I think there's some complexity there a little bit in that some of in part one, in addition to like setting up the tooling, it talks about how to use the tooling. So maybe we could separate that out, make that a little cleaner. That makes sense to me. My question is, we've been talking a little bit in our course about possibly creating like exam type content that folks could complete and then earn a badge. Would that be valuable to you in terms of like if you were ever hiring somebody to have that on their resume, if we went that route and invested in having some sort of badge?
Great question. I know that some countries love badges. I love to see what people can do.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't really, because having a badge doesn't actually tell me that the user understands the language or is able to write something in the language. It's just telling me that the person was able to click the right buttons in the right order.
Okay.
Basically, I know it can be more complicated than that, but it is not something I would want or prioritize.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay.
Just not to pick a fight right at the end, really, but one of the you're right. If people are badge hunters, and there are badge hunters out there, if you say you can get this badge for doing COBOL, you might end up attracting hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people who you had never thought of before to COBOL. So they come. It's like giving away. Sometimes I go to my local coffee shop and they say, "Do you want to try our something blend for today?" And often I say no, and they'll be like, "Well, the something blend for today is free or half price," and I try it. Maybe I don't like it, but maybe one day I will. So you might end up netting a Java developer. Do you see what I mean? You might end up netting people who become the engineers that you're looking for. So it cuts both ways. Yeah.
That's a very valid point, Joe. You open it up and attract folks, especially if a badge is attractive and an incentive for someone to try something new.
And there are badge hunters and there are achievement hunters, and they're out there.
But I agree, Rune. I mean, at the end of the day, it is the content and whether they really know it or not, right? So that is going to be the deciding factor.
But I've actually witnessed that many of the young people, they gravitate toward those things. Many of us that have been around and we're experienced, we learn something when we need to apply it. We don't just learn it to take a test or do something and say I'm done and then flush it out of our head. You know, so the only reason I see badges being good for this is maybe to attract some people, because I agree. Do I think a badge really means that they have got it? No, I just think that they were interested. They looked at the content to pass a test and they moved on, just like we all do in college.
Yeah, so again, I believe badges can be okay. It depends on what you have to go through to get it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you are aware of it. There's a Finnish university that is supplying a course called Elements of AI. And it's a listen to a lot of videos, answer some questions, and all of that is easy. But in between, you need to write an essay that states that you've understood what was just said in the last 15, 20 minutes of video. And when you posted that, you have to look at 3 other people, random people's essay, and evaluate if they can pass. So it's not a freebie to get it, and it's definitely not easy to get it.
Right, and I agree with that comment that you just made, because to do the badge correctly really requires a lot of the work on the people that are going to give that accreditation. And I agree with you that I'm working with some apprentices now where they're saying, how do I demonstrate an understanding? And I said, writing an article, or you got to echo back and research it more and echo back that you understand it with something like you just said. And then to have a reader of that and a grader of that is a little bit of work. So while I agree with you that that's really what needs to be done, it's a little bit labor intensive. It's not like we've got educators around, full-time educators to study what they've done, but I agree with it.
You know what they say, time flies when you're having fun. So we're almost at the top of the hour. I want to say thank you so much, Rune, for joining us and sharing your thoughts and giving us some really valuable inputs to consider for our plans going forward with the course. How could we make it better for our learners? So really appreciate all those candid inputs. Very, very valuable. Thank you. There is one quick question. Oh, that was Hartanto. Thank you again, Hartanto, for sharing the post. I just want to share my screen one quick moment here to share some of the additional resources that we have available for our learners. Again, the link here on this page you see is the link to the COBOL programming course on Open Mainframe project. A couple other links that I also want to point out is the same COBOL course is also available in a video format, and I think both Joe and Hartanto pointed out in chat. You can find links to them out of our Open Mainframe project repo as well, if you prefer taking the course in a video format. A couple of resources, again, I'd like to highlight, and one which is called the COBOL Fridays webinar series. If you're getting started in this journey and starting with COBOL, do check out those replays. It is a series of 13 sessions, I believe. Paul and I had the good fortune of hosting it and speaking with several experts from industry, from academia, and clients and students, and a good mix of folks who had a wealth of knowledge to share about COBOL today and how it is very important. And as always, we're always looking for our community to come join us, be part of this journey. So if you want to contribute, bring your ideas to the course, help us implement perhaps the next generation content. You see Hartanto here, who just dove right in because he found it super interesting. So you could be our next summer mentee, perhaps, if you're a student listening to this. And as always, you can continue to also help by guiding our learners on the COBOL Slack channel. So if you're someone who already has COBOL skills, consider being a community mentor. So I'm going to stop sharing. I think there's one quick comment here. Developer, yes. Thank you again, Hartanto, for sharing those links on chat to make it easy for our attendees to grab it. With that, I think we'll close out today's session. Thank you again, everybody. Joe, Paul, Hartanto, Mike, for being part of this COBOL programming course. It can't be where it is without your help. And Rune, thank you so much again for sharing your precious time and expertise with us this evening. Thanks, everybody. Bye.